welcome to Mythology and Folklore of Dani Hoots. I'm Dani Hoots, and today we'll be talking about my favorite god, Hades. Now, most people know Hades because he's in a lot of movies, TV shows, webtoons, anime. If you watch any or do any pop culture stuff, you know Hades. In many of these stories, though, Hades is depicted in various different ways. Like in Disney's Hercules, he's kind of this villainous, not really like Lucifer, but just evil wanting to take over and not good. But in Kami-Sami no Asobi, which is an anime, he is depicted as this brooding character, kind of emo, doesn't want to get along with anyone because bad fortune follows him, because he's death. And then, but in some webtoons, such as Lore Olympus and Punderworld, he is this, not really emo, but just kind of doing his work, has a lot of work to do, can't find love, and then falls in love with Persephone in those stories. But who was really Hades in ancient Greek mythology? So today I'll be talking about what we know and some of my thoughts, but mostly from everything from what we know from ancient myths. So Hades, son of Kronos and husband to Persephone, was the god of the dead. He also governed over funeral rites and made sure everyone had a right to burial. He was not the god over death, that was Thanos, but he was the god of making sure everyone went where they needed to go when they died, and made sure nothing left the underworld, whether it be a soul or any darkness creeping to the earth. Homer referred to the underworld as the House of Hades, which later got skewed into just calling the underworld Hades. So a lot of the time you'll see the god named Hades and also the underworld named Hades. The underworld is not a place that's easy to access unless you are dead. So it's just really the secretive place, and it's said that there are access points on the world, and usually it's by deep lakes or caves, or as anyone who watches Percy Jackson knows, there's one in Hollywood sign in California. So the name Hades is thought to either mean the god who made invisible, or the all-embracer or all-receiver. The reason he is associated with invisibility is because there's a helmet of invisibility that he uses, or it's because we never see the god of the underworld because we would have to be dead, so he's invisible. The reason he's also called all-embracer or all-receiver is because he receives all souls. Even though he receives all souls and we'll all see him, many people in ancient times feared him and would not say his name out loud in fear of angering him. So they referred to him as Pluto or Pluton. Pluto or Pluton also means rich, because the underworld contained all of the metals that were used, so like gold and all that. Part of me wonders if anyone ever referred to him as he who shall not be named, just like Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter. But we have no proof of that, unfortunately. The name also gets a little skewed when Rome took over Europe and they liked the Greek gods, and so they took a lot of those gods. There was a god named Dis or Dispater, which also was the god of riches and wealth because he was the god of fields. So those names, early on, those gods combined into one, and so Hades can be referred to as Hades, Dispater, Pluto, or Pluton. However, there's another god named Plutus, who's the son of Demeter, and he's a personification of wealth, but he's not the same god. So Hades was not necessarily depicted like he is today as this emo character, but a person without pity, or a heart without pity, as Hesiod mentioned in his writings. He was also hated by many ancient peoples, as I said earlier, but they did call upon him, especially during funeral rites, and there were some cults that involved him. The way that these people invoked him was smacking their arms down on the ground, sacrificing a black sheep, either male or female, and when the offering was given, they had to look away since no one can see Hades. There are a few temples that they have found that involve him, and then the Oracle of Dead in Thesprotia. Hades is generally depicted similar to his brothers. He has hair falling down the front of his face, and he's usually dark and brooding, so perhaps he really was depicted as emo before it was cool. But in general, there aren't many depictions and representations of him. And when he's described, he usually has a dark beard, is a regal god, and has his scepter that's either bird-tipped or a bicepter, which has 2 prongs. And then there aren't actually many major stories with him, like leading or mainly about him, other than the abduction of Persephone. But I will talk about the ones that do mention him right now. The gods of Olympus were born to the Titans of Rhea and Kronos. Rhea and Kronos had 6 children, and although some say that Zeus was the oldest, it's actually more known that Zeus was the youngest. The order of the children were Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and then Zeus. When Kronos realized that his children were strong and would take over the heavens, he decided, like a normal person or god or titan, to eat them and swallow them whole because they could not be killed. He was able to do this for everyone but Zeus, as Rhea conspired against him to save her son. And then that story I will tell when we talk about Zeus. But Zeus comes back when he grows up, is able to make Kronos regurgitate his siblings, and from there, the Titans and the gods began their war. So, the Titans and the gods were fighting for about 10 years when Gaia predicted that Zeus could win if he freed the creatures in Tartarus. Zeus did that and freed the Cyclopses. The Cyclopses, as a thank you, gave the presents to the 3 main gods. He gave Zeus a lightning rod, he gave Poseidon the trident, and he gave Hades his helmet of invisibility. They were able to defeat the Titans with these weapons, and then they took the Titans and put them in Tartarus, where they are still today. So after the gods defeated the Titans, they needed to figure out who ruled over what realm. Zeus, of course, took the heavens, because he wanted to be god over everything. But Poseidon and Hades took lots and pretty much gambled to figure out who became the ruler of the sea and who became the ruler of the underworld. Hades, of course, got the underworld, and Poseidon got the sea. In Stephen Fry's Mythos, he states that Hades laughed at Poseidon because he's like, haha, I got the underworld. I am better. And then Fry put that was the last time that Hades laughed. And I thought that was a funny little insert he put in there. In the underworld, after a while, Hades noticed that souls weren't going where they needed to go. Like, some good souls were going to Tartarus, some bad souls were going to not Tartarus. And so he needed more help. He appointed Charon to ferry the souls over the river Styx, and Zeus gave Hades 3 of his sons to appoint him as judges that include Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Acus. Acus judged the souls over Europe, Rhadamanthus judged the souls over Asia, and Minos was the final judge whose decisions were final. So Hades is mentioned in a few of the heroes' tales. To start off, I'll talk about Pirithous. His tale is kind of short. He pretty much wanted a wife, and was like, who could I pick to be my wife? I know, I'll steal Persephone from Hades because that seems logical. That's not logical. He grabbed his best friend, Theseus, who apparently didn't do his friendly duties of telling him this is a bad idea. And they went to the underworld together to try and woo Persephone. They fail, clearly, and they are both stuck on a stone or throne that makes them forget everything that is part of the river Lethe. So the most famous tale is that of Hercules, when he has to perform his last 3 labors and has to go to the underworld to get Kerberos. When he's in the underworld, he runs into Pirithous and Theseus and tries to save them, but he's only able to save Theseus before the world starts shaking, and he's just not able to get Pirithous. A lot more happens with Hercules, but that will be saved for when I talk about Hercules. But when Hercules tries to leave and back through the gates of the underworld, he runs into Hades, who tries to stop him. Hercules hits Hades with an arrow through the shoulder, and it was the first time that Hades felt pain. Because of this, he decides to let Hercules go. And when he's leaving, Hercules asks if he can take Kerberos, and Hades said, yeah, sure, if you can tame him without any weapons. Hercules does this and takes Kerberos. The story continues with Hercules, and he actually runs into Hades again in the Battle of Pylos, when Hercules is trying to take down the king there. Hades actually comes to help the people of Pylos. It's not sure if he was there because he was their protector, or if it was because he was trying to get all the souls. It doesn't make sense to me that he was harvesting souls, because that wasn't his job. That was another god. My guess is that he was a protector of that town or city. But I don't know about you, but that would be the last god I wouldn't want to accidentally hit while I'm, battling. Oops. I hit the god of death. What's going to be waiting for me? In the tale of Orpheus, Orpheus goes to the underworld to get his wife Eurydice, who died a tragic death. Orpheus was a musician and was able to get pretty far in the underworld using his music and talent. But he had to convince Hades and Persephone to release his wife. He does actually convince Hades and Persephone using a song about love, and they kind of look at each other like, oh, I remember when we were first in love, when I kidnapped you. But when the song stops, Hades realizes his mistake and wishes that he didn't give in to Orpheus. So he adds a caveat. You may have your wife if you do not turn back to see if she's following you, and she must be 10 steps or more behind you the entire way. Orpheus agrees, starts to leave the underworld, and keeps calling back, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Don't worry, just keep going. So he's getting closer and closer to the gates of Hades. And he starts to run. So when he runs out of the gates, he gets 10 steps and turns back, but doesn't realize that his wife was now more than 10 steps because he was running too fast, and she was just 1 step away from being saved, and she dies again. So there are 2 more stories that include Hades that are kind of smaller. This includes Asclepius, who was bringing people back from the dead, and Hades got mad, went to Zeus, and was like, this isn't fair. He's not supposed to take my souls away from me. And so Zeus used his lightning bolt and just killed him right there. I don't know if anyone tried to talk that out and be like, hey, can you stop? Or he was just thinking, oh, this is great, I'm bringing people back to the dead, and then boom, he's dead. There's also the tale of the king of Creon, of Thebes, who was not giving his warriors burial rites, which pissed off Hades and Persephone, and they sent a plague to Thebes. There were 2 maidens then sacrificed, who both then became comets, because the gods took pity on them. So it wasn't their fault that the king had done this. So the helmet of Hades was actually used by a few different people. Athena used it to sneak past Ares during the Trojan War. Hermes used it when he was battling a giant, and Hermes and Athena gave it to Perseus when he was going to go battle the Gorgon Medusa. So Hades is also known as a god who was infertile because he was the god of the dead. But there's some references of him having kids, but they're kind of convoluted, and I'll discuss why right now. So the Ironies, who were 3 goddesses of earthly wrath, were sometimes referred to as Hades' daughters. More times than not, they were referred to as being earthly born or just coming out of the earth. The thought is that maybe they're referred to as Hades' daughters because he was seen as a wrathful god sometimes, and so they were kind of like his daughters and creatures that were associated with him. So Zagreus is also known as Hades' son, and is also the main character of the game Hades, which I still need to play. I have it. It's sitting there. I still need to play it. But when looking at this story surrounding him, it kind of sounds more like it was Zeus masquerading as Hades and going to the underworld and having kids with Persephone. This happens more than once. It also happens with the goddess Melanoi, who is also known as a daughter of Hades, but looking at the story, again, it's probably Zeus. Lastly, there's Macaria, who is the goddess of blessed death, and she is the only goddess who probably wasn't Zeus, but is never referred to who her mother is. To me, and this is me personally, I think it's more a creation out of the world Hades, because that's like surrounding death and stuff, just like there's a lot of creatures and stuff that come out of the earth, so why wouldn't there be one out of the underworld? And also I kind of believe Hades would be infertile if he was the god of death, or the god over the dead. So lastly, I will talk about the wife of Hades and also his concubines. Sorry to burst your bubble. He did have other affairs and women than Persephone. The first is Minth, who is a nymph. There's 2 different stories. One that Persephone finds out about her, goes and stomps her into Garden Mint, and that's where we get mint from. The other story was that he actually was in love with her before he met Persephone, and then when he took Persephone to the underworld, Minth was boasting how she's more beautiful than Persephone, and that Hades is going to just dump Persephone to the side and bring her down, and she was saying all this in front of Demeter, and Demeter got mad and stomped her into mint. The other is Luce, who's also a nymph and the daughter of Oceanus. Hades found her, brought her to the underworld, and was in love with her until she died. When she died, she became a beautiful white poplar that is still in Elysium, being beautiful for everyone who has died and is in that world of the underworld. So when looking with the myth of Persephone and how she became the wife of Hades, I'm going to tell kind of the beginning of it, and then next time we'll be talking about Persephone, so I'll pick up from that, talk about who she was before she met Hades, and then the tales involving her. Hades, a little bit mad at his brothers, went to Zeus and asked for a wife, because he didn't get anyone, and Zeus and Poseidon just slept around with everyone, so why couldn't Hades have a wife? Zeus picked his daughter Persephone to give to Hades. Now I'm not sure what the logic was behind that, but that is who he chose. Hades, seeing Persephone, wasn't sure if she would love him because he's dark and brooding and she's the goddess of spring. So, logical thing was to abduct her. He makes a beautiful white flower in the middle of a field that she's never seen before. So she goes and picks it, and the world opens up around her. Hades comes in his golden chariot with his 4 immortal dark horses, picks her up, and takes her to the underworld. I hope you enjoyed my first video. It means a lot that you all watch this. If you liked it, please subscribe, hit like, give me a comment. I also have a Patreon going on to help just keep these going and also to help with my writing. I'm also an author, and I have many stories that you can get access to through my Patreon. Between now and September 30th of 2021, you can also get a postcard that you can color of the Greek gods, and I'll write a thank you on it, and they're personalized, and they are by Post with Heart. That's just a little extra for everyone who signs up, because I just started it. If you can't subscribe to that, you can't commit, I also have a coffee if you ever want to pitch in. So if you also want to read my blog that I have this all written out that I talked about in this video, check it out. I also included some art from artists that I love that I got permission for. So yeah, please subscribe. Thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed.